From Brandeis University, remotely, welcome to Recall This Book, a podcast that looks backward to see into the future. Our idea is to assemble scholars and writers from different disciplines to make sense of contemporary issues, problems, and events by looking at books that shape the world we inherited. Today, our hosts are myself, Elizabeth Ferry, hello, and Pu Wang, who's an associate professor of modern Chinese literature at Brandeis University. His specialties are literature and culture and comparative frameworks, critical theory and translation studies, and he's also an accomplished and highly regarded poet. Hello, Pu, and welcome.
Hi, everyone.
And we're also very glad to welcome our guest for this week, Lisa Dillman from Emory University. Lisa is a professor of Spanish and Portuguese, and she's a translator, a very accomplished translator. She's translated many novels and scholarly works, and most recently, several works by Andrés Barba, as well as Yuri Herrera's Signs Preceding the End of the World and the Transmigration of Bodies. In 2016, she won the Best Translated Book Award for Signs Preceding the End of the World, which is the topic of our podcast today. Welcome, Lisa. We're really happy to have you.
Thanks. Hi, I'm really happy to be here.
Okay, great. So maybe, Lisa, you could start by telling us a little bit about the book and about your experience of translating it.
Sure, yeah. I think it's a complicated book by all accounts, and it's a novel that can be viewed in what I think of as three different but complementary ways. So it's the story of a young woman named Makina, who travels to the United States in search of her missing brother. She's been sent on this mission by her mother. And in that sense, the novel can be read as a fairly straightforward, literal social commentary on US-Mexico relations, on lots of issues surrounding migration, treatment of immigrants, social justice, feminism, all sorts of contemporary issues. It's also kind of a classic quest tale in which, you have all of the steps you might see in any classic quest. So you have the call being set forth, in this case, by a woman, set forth by Makina's mother, Cora, who sends her to find her brother. So we have a sort of inversion of stereotypical gendered roles. We have Makina as the sort of archetypal heroine. And of course, she crosses into this new world and has many tests that have to be passed before she can reach her goal, which is not a straightforward one and which can be debated what that means. And then there's also a reading as this being the entire book being a voyage to Mictlan, which is the Aztec underworld. And in that reading, the souls of the dead must travel, it's sometimes 8, sometimes 9 steps in order to reach Mictlan, where their souls can be at peace. And in that reading of the book, Makina would actually be dead the entire time. So it's a complicated book, and it's also complicated on all sorts of linguistic levels, which makes translating it, which made translating it both really, really fun and rewarding, and also incredibly challenging.
I'm not a scholar of translation studies, unlike Pu, who will have much more to say probably. But, there's sort of, on the one hand, there's this idea of translation as this kind of carrying across, and then can it succeed or fail at being a sort of clear lens or a sort of, perfect transferal. And often the answer to that is no, it never can. It always entails some form of loss, right? But what you're suggesting, and what it seems like the book is suggesting, is kind of getting out of the idea of loss or gain entirely to this sort of multiplicity, simultaneity of multiple worlds or something like that. Does that make sense? Or is that?
I would agree with that. I find it far more fruitful to think of translation as a remediation or an iteration or a proliferation than I do a transference, because precisely as you've just said, I think conceiving of translation as a transfer of meaning automatically leads to this rhetoric of loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. which sort of seems to be embracing the indeterminacy of the text, but kind of stops short of doing so as fully as this might.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah. It seems like the novel itself is in some ways about translation too, right?
Exactly.
Makina is this kind of, this messenger character, this border crosser. There's a great line at one point where she says, you are the door, not the one who walks through it.
Exactly. Yeah.
As a kind of principle of living.
Yes.
So I'm curious what either of you think about that.
Yeah, I think, if I may, Lisa, I would like to add on Elizabeth's question about this novel being not only a text you translated, but also a novel, a text about translingual existence or translingual death. As a scholar of literature, I simply cannot resist citing your translation, some very important lines. Elizabeth just went for one line, and I'm thinking about the place where the protagonist Makina enters the United States. This is the moment of border crossing. She is a messenger. She is the symbol of a switchboard, and translator is always compared to a messenger, especially in the instrumentalist view of it. And she starts to hear this intermediary tongue among the Latinos, and then there is the line about the language is being like the protagonist Makina herself. Makina is, quote, malleable, erasable, permeable. These words can also be used to support your argument about the inherent instability of language, literature, and the text. I really like you to. I would really like you to come back to that moment to think about this larger theoretical question within that very specific plot of Makina being a female messenger entering the United States, seeing this world, encountering Latinos, and calling the other peoples Anglos.
Yes, I think that in many ways, as you said, the book is about translation as a metaphor and in a literal sense, right? It's Makina herself literally is a translator. She literally translates for people at the switchboard in not 2 but 3 languages. And she's a character who a lot of people have referred to as sort of kick-ass, right? She's an ass kicker. And what's really fascinating to me is that this power of hers derives from wielding language, right? The power that she is able to have over people wherever she goes. She does use a little physical force as well, but the power that she truly has derives from her skill with translating words, as well as knowing which words not to say and when not to say them. And so, as you said, when she's at home, she works as a switchboard operator, working in 3 languages. And then when you refer to this, the beautiful intermediary tongue that she talks about on arrival into the US, when she is wandering around the town that she arrives to, one of the things that I find so generative and hopeful and just lovely about this is that she views this intermediary tongue as a source of celebration, right? And so I know that there has been a lot of poetry, scholarship, et cetera, on ideas of loss and the pain of losing languages. But for her, it's something to celebrate. And she revels in the creativity of this new language that is being made by these new inhabitants of the land where she is. And she is shown in this situation sort of learning, because this is a new language, and in some senses kind of transcends perhaps her knowledge of English, which she already had and already used as at the switchboard, but then continues to use. I mean, again, in one of the most poignant, I think, scenes in the entire novel, when she, along with a group of other men, are detained by a cop. Again, she uses language, right? She uses language to get out of the situation, and snatches, and in this case, language made material. So she snatches a pen and paper and writes down a series of words that leaves the cop so gobsmacked he basically lets people go. So yes, I think in many, many ways, the novel is about language, the power of language, and the malleability of language.
I mean, I read in the sort of bio of Herrera, the author, that he has a PhD in linguistics, right? And also that you and he spoke a lot about over the course of your translation, right? You were sort of constantly in.
Yes.
Did he ever talk about these questions about translation and language? I mean, as a dimension, as a subject of the book?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I would say now I'm working on his 5th book now, so we've gotten to be fairly good friends, I would say. And all of his books have language as a central theme, one that perhaps could be overlooked, that might not literally form plot elements per se. That would be arguable, but the wielding of language and the power of words and the material realities that one can create with them, I think, is something.
Yeah. And I guess I was, just to be more specific, have you talked about these kind of theories of translation that you were touching on, or this sort of idea of the multiple worlds of language that languages produce, or things like that?
Perhaps not at the time that I was translating it. I actually translated this book probably 7 years ago. So, many, quite honestly, many of the books that I have read and have influenced my thinking about translation most have been written since I. Although I partially feel like they have articulated senses that I had and didn't know how to put into words. And I will also say that Herrera is by far the most, I would perhaps embracing of this post-structuralist indeterminacy of any writer I've worked with. He has from the start spoken about co-creation and has talked about things like, the importance of being true to the translation.
So co-creation of the text between the author and the translator, you mean?
Yes, and the reader as well. I mean, I don't know if I can say this I don't know if I know this as a fact, but my strong inclination is that one of the reasons he has not often or super openly spoken about the entire Mictlan reading of the novel is because he believes, this part I'm sure, that the novel means what meaning you bring to it. Right? That he is not the purveyor of meaning, and so therefore.
Right, there's not a secret text that he has the key to, or something like that. Yeah.
If you didn't realize this, you missed it.
Right.
I think Herrera's language, Herrera's fictional novelistic language, sometimes speaks volumes to our urgent politics of languages in the United States and beyond. I have to go for this line. Quote, more than the midpoint between homegrown and Anglo, their tongue is a nebulous territory between what is dying out and what is not yet born. So it's just a line that is so powerful not only in the flow of the plot about Makina's journey. It is something I would like to quote in my next book about translation. But at the same time, I think this line speaks directly to the current cultural political debates here and beyond.
I think that's really interesting, and I think it's another sign of hopefulness in these very bleak times. But the concept of, because when you speak of linguistic purity, and for decades people talked about Spanglish as some sort of bastardization, both on the left and on the right, right? It's either it's incorrect English, it's incorrect Spanish, it's something for people who don't know how to properly speak one language or the other, right? And so this linguistic elitism, and the idea then of, because in the section Pooh that you're quoting there, he talks about people believing something to be perfect until they slip into another tongue. And so I very like the idea of what is dying out being this elitist concept of linguistic purity, and what is coming being this plurality and this acceptance. It's something that I in political terms I think of to myself now quite a bit, in terms of this place that we're in with such horrific political views and such extreme hatred and intolerance being just spewed. And sometimes I think, yes, but this is dying out. And
yeah, right. It's interesting to have a book that's called Signs Preceding the End of the World described as hopeful, but I definitely agree with the reading of it. Yeah. Well, maybe this is the moment in which we shift to our recallable books section. This is when the part in the conversation where we kind of suggest things for each other and for our listeners that we might want to read or engage with further. So I don't know, Pooh, have you brought a recallable book to our table?
Yes, actually, I try to do something counterintuitive, but I think this is in the spirit of Lisa's translation of the signs preceding the end of the world. I have a really heavy book here. So actually, it's not. It is a dictionary. So this is a dictionary of untranslatables.
Yeah. Okay.
So it is a kind of encyclopedian dictionary for philosophers, especially for philosophers working in the European continental tradition. But in your translator's note, Lisa, you mentioned how you end up turning the concept, the literary concept of verse into a verb in order to translate this Herrera's neologism. So I think that's a moment where, according to your interpretation, where I saw this convivial experience of the Arabic traditions and Latin tongues. And actually, the dictionary of untranslatables is a kind of, in a way, very European project. It is about actually some key concepts in the European philosophical traditions that historically are considered as the tokens of universal value. For example, the concept of freedom, the concept of justice, the concept of being.
Right.
But we know that in many East Asian languages, we do not have the verb to be. So actually, living in today's world, when we look at all these concepts from the European cosmopolitan traditions, they are actually untranslatable. Being is the most fundamental concept of a Western philosophical tradition traced back to Greek roots, but the very foundation is a verb that is quite unique and particular to a certain part of our family tree of human languages. And leafing through this book, I also noticed that actually even when we only look at the philosophical concepts, there was a deep cross fertilization of languages of Latin, Hebrew, and Arabic traditions. In addition, this dictionary is originally a collective project, collective endeavor done in French, and now it's available in English. So that shows us that even for untranslatables, we can have a translation. Yeah. So that's also another way of our celebration of translation in our global culture.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, Lisa, what have you brought?
Okay, well, I have here a book called Impostures. It's funny when you said, Pooh, that you had a very large book. I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder if we brought the same one. Right. It's a fairly new book called Impostures, and this is also in the same vein. It is a translation of al-Hariri's poetry from Arabic, a groundbreaking translation, and I've yet to read it, but have read several reviews about it, and I'm very excited about it because al-Hariri's poetry is often thought of as untranslatable and is firmly grounded in wordplay, palindromes, riddles, etc. And so Michael Cooperson, the translator, has been very creative in his translatorial moves, and translated many of these poems, translated each of these poems in a distinct literary style. So there's a poem translated into Cockney rhyming slang, a poem translated into, I believe, like cowboy English, poems that imitate Mark Twain, etc. Again, sort of upholding the idea of translation as a creative authorial act, which transforms meaning in its search to recreate an analog to the original, the source text.
So as usual, I came with something and then decided to do something else in the middle of our conversation, which to me is a sign of a good conversation because it's gotten me some new thoughts and new ideas. And I don't have a copy of it here, but the thing that I would like to bring is a book of poems by a poet named George Kalogeris called Guide to Greece. And it's a book that is both about the kind of about a series of different kinds of ancient and contemporary Greek poetic traditions, and sort of extending those, including the poet Cavafy and other poems, poetic traditions that I don't know as well because I'm not an expert, but there's a lot of kind of beautiful self-consciousness about that. And then also his own Greek American upbringing in Massachusetts. So I think that, it's a book that sort of really beautifully brings together these questions about how to write Greek poetry in English, but also what it means to be Greek in the United States, and sort of seeing this kind of flow of language that is both kind of continuous, but also sort of constantly making these new forms. So, and I think even the title of the book, which is Guide to Greece, is kind of exemplifies that. So I think it's very much within the spirit of both Herrera's book and the story that it tells, and also the project of translation. So.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah. So, and for our listeners, all of these will be on our website so that you get a chance to check them out. So, okay, well, I want to very much thank Lisa and Pooh today. Thank you so much for a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure.
Yeah.
And in closing, I want to tell all of you that Recall This Book is the brainchild of John Plotz and Elizabeth Ferry. It's affiliated with Public Books and is usually, but not right now, recorded and edited in the Music Media Lab of the Brandeis Library. It typically has co-hosts of John and myself and a number of different colleagues, including Pooh and others at Brandeis in Boston and beyond. Our music comes from a song by Eric Chaslow and Barbara Cassidy, Fly Away. Sound editing is by Claire Ogden, and production assistance, including website design and social media, is done by Nai Kim, and Nai is also the co-producer of this episode. Mark DeLello oversees and advises on all our technological matters, and we appreciate the support of University Librarian Matthew Sheehy, Dean Dorothy Hodgson, and the Mandel Center for the Humanities at Brandeis. We always want to hear from you with your comments, criticisms, and suggestions for future episodes, and you can email us directly at ferry@brandeis.edu or plots@brandeis.edu, and you can contact us via social media and our website. If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to write a review or rate us on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever else you get your podcasts. And you may be interested in checking out past episodes, including topics like Vectors of Warfare with Vincent Brown, Ademir Usmani on the origins of mass incarceration, and Leah Price on children's books. So thank you and goodbye until next time.